public speak into this so everybody in the back.
Regarding the extension of the tax cuts, is the length of the, if you could tell us the length of the extension that the Republican bill would create, and I guess address, isn't extending tax cuts still a temporary measure, and what's going to really be done to address the fiscal cliff on a longer term basis?
Well, what we are going to do is our proposal in the House will be to extend the current tax law for a year. With that, and assuming that there are changes in the election, that will give us the opportunity to look at overall tax reform. That you can actually look at reducing marginal rates. Corporate rates were not competitive worldwide today because we're the highest in the world as far as our corporate tax rates. Having a fair, flatter tax code that would actually increase growth and opportunity. But what this would do would give us a year to do that. And you're going to see a lot of the special interest loopholes basically eliminated. And that's the way you can actually generate more revenue, have more economic activity if you would actually have a tax code that was fair, flatter, competitive in the world marketplace. And that's what the plan is.
Just as a
Congressman, in the you mentioned the problem with no budget, but won't we also have a second crisis on the debt ceiling as a result of the spending?
It's not certain yet when exactly the debt ceiling will be reached. Most people believe it will be after the first of the year. If in fact it were to come sooner, the Treasury Department thinks they have enough flexibility to avoid a crisis for a period of time. But no, absolutely. When you've got $16 trillion of debt, and the deficits are over $1 trillion each of the last 4 years now, the debt ceiling is a huge, huge issue. And what we've got to do is to rein in the spending in Washington, to get some common sense there as far as our budget, to actually have the Senate do their work and actually pass a budget that we could get agreement on that would actually reduce spending is extraordinarily important. And what you're going to see is the financial, if that is not done, the financial markets are going to be in disarray. You're going to see so much uncertainty with the tax code, the regulatory scheme, everything that's coming to a head here at the end of the year, that there's going to be I think, potential huge disruption as far as the economy. You also put on top of that the sequestration that was put in place with the last debt ceiling deal, where you've got the total national security accounts about $600 billion in cuts, other non-defense discretionary another $600 billion at the end of the year. The Defense Department already has about a $437 billion cut in place over the next 10 years. This would, our national security would certainly be at risk. This is interesting, but what you're going to see with the President's health care bill, they're going to be hiring about 16,000 new IRS agents to enforce the health care bill and giving pink slips to about 20,000 Marines. I mean, that's the new priority apparently with these folks.
You Marines don't like that.
No, it certainly, as far as our national security, is a huge issue that has got to be addressed. Yeah.
Congressman, I have a question about student loans, and bear with me as I tee this up a little bit. As you know, the administration federalized the student loan program a couple of years ago, and 100% of all loans are now made from the federal government. And virtually no meaningful efforts are being made by the Department of Education to minimize defaults. That's something that the guarantee agency structure did very well. And I work for an organization that represents the student loan industry, and there's 30-some guaranteed agencies around the country. They still have an infrastructure in place to reach every kid in every county, but the Department of Education, still fighting the direct loan battles, refuses to take advantage of that. We know from the department that the default rates that they announced in September are going to be ugly. They say the year from September will be uglier, and the year from that September will be uglier still. Our members have the ability to provide, they've got the training staff, they've got the relationships with high school counselors, relationships with the schools. We can't get this department to take advantage of the infrastructure that they helped build, and frankly, the two folks in Congress helped build. So do you see any chance of any bipartisan support in terms of trying to reduce defaults by taking advantage of this infrastructure before it atrophies and goes away? Thank you.
I don't see anything happening before the end of the year. Obviously, in a new Congress, maybe with a new administration, that this certainly would be addressed because the infrastructure, like you said, is in place. Should also go back to the government takeover of the student loan business. Remember the president's health care bill? Okay, this student loans, because they got $80 billion worth of credit with the takeover of student loans with the federal government in the health care bill. They included student loans in the health care bill. They excluded doctors, the cost of paying doctors, and the cliff that doctors have as far as the Medicare reimbursement, right, Doc?
Yeah.
Because that would have cost $232 billion. So, and I noticed yesterday the talk about how, and there's an editorial in the paper that said that this was actually going to, the health care bill would get a savings. Well, that's fine if you exclude paying doctors. If you assume that cliff that you're going to have isn't made up, you know, the CBO, they have all of these footnotes underneath that say this has to happen or this can't happen for this to be true. If you look at the law, okay, by itself, fine, but in reality, that stuff's never going to happen. But it's going to take a new administration, it's going to take a new Congress to do exactly what you're talking about, utilizing the private sector, the infrastructure that's there to actually service these loans to make sure that the collections are done. And that is a huge, I mean, how many jobs does that affect here locally?
35, well, locally, hundreds locally, 30-some thousand nationally.
Right, that are going to go away.
Yeah.
Congressman, I know you're not in the Senate, but...
Thank you.
Yeah. In your opinion, can they get this health care bill repealed with 51 votes, or will it take 60?
You could... It takes 51 votes to do reconciliation. And so you, yes, in fact, you could do it with, if you had a different majority in the United States Senate with 51 votes, you could, yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Hi, Pete from Dallas County.
Yeah.
Quick question on, there's a lot of economic anxiety out there. What are some ideas, solutions you have for helping people have a little more financial security, save for their future?
Well, the number one problem today, and especially focusing here today on small business, like I talked about earlier, is just the uncertainty that's out there. If you could actually have the tax code extended so that you would actually know what your taxes are going to be next year. Anybody here tried to do estate planning lately? I mean, it's impossible because another thing, marginal tax rates are going to go up, capital gains tax rates are going to go up, dividend income taxes are going to go up, and you can't, and the death tax reverts back to $1 million exemption with a 55% rate on top of it. You can't plan anything today. The best thing we can do would be a moratorium on regulations, which we just passed a bill in the House this week to do that, on new regulations that are stifling small businesses and give certainty out there on the tax code. Now, there are a lot of things that we could do to encourage investment, but basically, you know, what we've got right now is this, it's coming to a point where you're frozen in place today. And that's the biggest thing we can do to grow this economy, to hire people, is to give people certainty out there. And we've got to have a real change in Washington. Absolutely.